Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Welcome to Running in the 70s. Today on the podcast, we're visiting with a runner from Pennsylvania who started competing at the collegiate level in the 70s and continued his career on. Let's talk running in the 70s today with Dick Richard Wolf. Hi, Dick.
Hi, Matthew.
Hey, good to talk with you. Let's start with what you could recall as your competitive runner origin story. Do you remember the first time you were in a competitive race?
Well, that would go back to junior high and seventh grade, running junior high track.
When you ran a race. Do you remember anything about it?
Not really, but the distance was probably 100 or 200 yards because it was in yards back then, not metric. When you're beginning a sport, you try the shorter stuff and you find that you can't do it. So you gradually move up in distance until you find a distance that suits your capabilities, because you're born either fast twitch muscles or not. In most cases, you either have speed or you don't, but you can build endurance.
Yeah. Let's talk about the psychology of it. Thinking back, when you first started identifying yourself as a runner and as a competitive runner, when did you start to say, hey, I'm a runner?
Probably ninth grade.
Cross country or track?
Both, because in track, I set the school record in the junior high for the 440-yard dash, running around 60 seconds or just under 60 seconds. And as a freshman, I made the varsity cross country team at my high school.
By that point, you thought of yourself as a runner and a competitive runner.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about early successes and early failures. What was the surprise or what was the stress? Surprise of winning or enjoyment of winning? How did you handle not winning or not being the best? At some point, we all reach a barrier where we're not the best in the world or something, or you lose a race. Do you remember anything about early losses and how you handled those?
Not as a freshman, but more as a sophomore, as I got better on our team for both cross country and track. I remember some track races where I won the 2-mile and helped our team to beat a rival school. And in cross country, one defining moment, which I thought was a failure, but then turned out to be a success, was in my county meet in cross country. I finished 21st, and I thought they gave 20 medals. So I was a young kid, so I was crying. I was upset because I was X+1. Then I found out that they gave 24 medals, and then I was very happy.
Right. So interesting. So the same race, the same experience, but it was the recognition that changed your kind of outlook on how that day went.
Absolutely, because had I not been successful early on, who knows if I would have stuck with the sport or not. I might have switched to soccer or something else, but I had early successes in running from the junior high level, and that just continued onward.
That's an interesting point. If it's all failure, it quickly becomes not enjoyable, struggle, all this other negative stuff.
I had another motivating point too, which once I got into high school at Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, my dad was my cross country and track coach. I had a fatherly influence driving me to a certain degree, but I also had success, which made it easier at the home front.
Do you think that your dad being a coach influenced you getting started before you were on his teams?
No, I was always one of the fastest kids in the neighborhood as a juvenile. I could run away from anybody else to avoid fights and stuff like that. I had natural running ability when I was little. It just carried on from there. And then again, I had success, and success in most cases breeds more drive and desire.
Did the need to run away from fights go away as you got older, or was that a part of growing up where you grew up?
No, I'd rather do flight than fight.
Great. You mentioned that your dad was your coach in 2 sports. How did you and he navigate that relationship, which is different than just father-son?
If I had a bad day, sometimes it came home, so we had to tread lightly. Sometimes it was good, sometimes not, but in most cases it was good because I liked track and field and I had access to all sorts of information and results and all of that right there at the home front to keep me involved and keep me interested. I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah.
Because I was successful, that made it easier for him. If the sport was basketball or something, if he started me, people could say, oh, it's the coach's kid, and the coach is playing favorites and starting him. But in track and field and cross country, the times tell the truth. If I didn't do the performance, I wouldn't have been on the varsity because I would not have, made the grade.
Right. So there we've got the nature of track teams and cross country in which it's individual performance, but a team sport. Were you ever part of any relay teams?
Yes, I ran the 4x800 and occasionally the mile relay in high school, mostly in dual meets. But when I got to big meets, the best event for me was the 2 mile run. So I ran that at county meets and district meets and invitationals.
I want to have reflections on your whole life and career as we go through this discussion, but let's keep moving the progression on your high school career. What do you think was your best achievement up through high school?
My best achievement through high school was probably making the state meet individually in cross country as a junior and senior, and getting a state medal in Pennsylvania cross country state championships as a junior. And to this date, I am still the only male medalist at the state cross country championships in my high school 51 years later.
Wow. And do you remember who were your key competitors at that state meet? Were you seeing competitors that you knew, or was that a carnival of who are these people and a remote thing? Were the people on that just names on a piece of paper, or did you know your competitors?
Both. I grew up in what's called District 3 in the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association, and District 3 historically was strong back then. My junior year, I was 8th in the district, but then when I went to the state meet, I finished 17th out of the whole state in Class B, and I was the 5th from my district. I was 17th, but I was 5th from my district.
Oh, yeah. So let's put this in perspective. What year was that, your junior and senior year in high school?
Probably before you were born, but it was 1971. 1970 was my junior year.
So 1970, 1971, you're hitting your stride, succeeding in competitive running at the school level. Were you training on the roads besides running on the tracks and cross-country fields?
Yes, all the above.
Yeah. So how was that? That was before the running craze hit America. So were there other people in your town apart from you and your team running? What was it like running on the roads in the early 70s in central Pennsylvania?
There weren't a lot of other runners. Like you said, it was before the running boom. At my high school, I was the first kid to qualify for the state meet in cross country. I was the first medalist at our district meet, and I was the first medalist and still the only medalist at the state meet for my high school.
What was it like on the streets? Were cars sharing the roads?
Mostly I was running, the sidewalks, and, I lived in a small town, so we had a lot of country roads, so I didn't have to deal a whole lot with traffic. I preferred running, over hill and dale, on soft surfaces. So I tried to run on golf courses and high school and college grounds and, stay off the roads because they were hard on the legs.
Right. When you're succeeding and you're kind of the local success story, you're in a class of the successor of the person that the other teammates look to, but there are other competitors that you realize, okay, I'm not going to be the champion at this level, certainly not in your junior year. How did you feel about your competitors? What was your view of the people who were better than you, who you were sure to most likely face a giant challenge competing with?
Some I couldn't beat, but most Sometimes I beat them, sometimes they beat me. They were all friends. It was all good rivalry competition, and I enjoyed competing against the kids from the other schools. To this date, some of my high school friends, as well as my college competitors, are still very good friends.
All right, let's make the jump then and just continue the chronology. At what point did you decide or realize you were going to be a college level running athlete, that this would go on?
I went to prep school for a year after high school because I was of a young age in my senior year. I didn't turn 17 until halfway through my senior year. So most everybody I was running against was older than me. So I went to prep school for a year to two things: find out if I wanted to go to college, and then secondly, get that year of added maturity so that when I went to college, I was the same age as the other freshmen that were going.
All right.
I chose my college, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, because they had the academic program that I was looking for. And the prior year before I went there, they won the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference cross-country championship as a team. So they had an existing good program. So I was going to a school that had a good program where I wouldn't automatically be the top kid.
Well, let's talk about that interim year. Did you race or train in your year of prep school?
Absolutely. I set the course record there on their home cross-country meet, as well as numerous meets that when I ran away. In track, I set the 2-mile school record and had some good successes there.
What league or competition organization were they? They weren't part of the normal Pennsylvania high school system.
That is correct. They were not part of the PIAA. They were part of an independent school system. The schools that I competed against were other preparatory schools such as Lawrenceville Prep, Westtown School, and other ones along the East Coast.
All right, let's get into IUP, Indiana, Pennsylvania. You show up there as a freshman. Did you know anybody?
No.
You're new. And what was it like transitioning to, in the early 70s, college level training, your first season cross country?
I got injured because they had me running more mileage and harder mileage than I was used to. Plus, it was on roads and hard surfaces that my legs couldn't take the pounding. At the prep school, I was a boarder, so I had already experienced living away from home, so that wasn't any shock to my system. But I went into a program where I was running over the summer, but I didn't do enough on the hard surfaces at the level that was needed to be ready as a freshman. Thus, I got injured, and in my early years at IUP, I raced sporadically and ran sporadically with the team due to leg injuries.
How did that hit you? Was that your first major injury that interrupted racing?
I had some little ones in high school, but it hit me hard at Indiana.
How did that affect your view? I mean, how we can vary on the scale of anger, depression, rejection, motivation. What was the experience of saying, this is not good, what I've done or what's happened to me?
I had to sit out for a while. I mean, I continued with my schooling and all that, but I got away from the team a little bit, and I tried to focus on just getting healthy and building a base and more or less starting over. And it took me almost 2 years to get back to the point where my legs were strong enough and injury-free so that I could compete at the collegiate level. Because my freshman year, I made it halfway through the season running on the junior varsity and the varsity. So I was on the varsity enough to letter, but I didn't finish the season. 1973, so I wasn't fully healthy enough again for competitive training until the fall of 1975.
And what was the transition like? You did have the year at prep school from a coach that you had for several years, your father, into a completely new coaching system.
At the prep school, I had a good base because my father knew running. You know, he was a health and phys ed teacher. So at the prep school, I did what the coaches wanted, but I also did extra because I knew what I needed to do to run well there.
And how about university? What was the transition there to the coaching that you encountered?
We had very good coaches at Indiana. Again, I had to listen to my body and do what I knew to train, but also to keep me healthy once I got by over the initial injuries.
It was a 2-year process before you said, okay, I'm fit and I can go all in on this.
Correct.
What about your psychological journey there? Was it ups and downs, or was it just a long journey you thought would come out?
I was motivated. I wanted to prove people wrong and prove that I could do it. So I was highly motivated to get back to racing and racing well.
And of course, there's a transition in both events and distances. From you were running the maximum distance that the high school had, the 2 mile, and the cross country running. How did you make the decision and the event selection at university track level?
I didn't have the fast 400 speed to be a good miler. My distances gravitated to the longer side. So 3 mile in track, 6 mile in track, 5 mile and 10K in cross country were my strengths. And then even at the prep school, we ran 2.5 miles in our dual meets, but I also did, one 6 mile race post season there where I ran respectable, ran 34 something for, a 10K or a 6 mile, something like that. So I was already familiar with, running that distance because on the weekends I would do 10 mile runs.
What was the state of public running then? Road racing and the public nature. We're talking here about running in the 70s when the major revolution happened in the U.S. with running in the public psyche. Was any of that apparent to you, or was still the loneliness and the obscurity of the long distance runner still a part of your identity?
No, there were road races back then. My senior year at Elizabethtown, my first race in fall before we started our league schedule was a 3 mile race that was all on the road along the Harrisburg riverfront. And it was broken down into age groups, 14 and under, 15 to 16, and then 17 and 18-year-old. I was only a 16-year-old senior, but I won the 3 mile segment in the 15 to 16 age group. There were road races. They just weren't a lot of them like there were come the late 70s and 80s where there were races every weekend if you wanted to run them.
Let's talk about teams and teammates. The transition, a lot of college athletes in every sport will be the best kid in their high school. Then they come to the university and they're one in the mix. How was the competition between teammates at university, and how competitive was it?
Well, my freshman year at Indiana, there were 3 of us that were the top recruits. Myself, Kim Burke, then another individual, Andrew Fife. We were the top 3 recruits that year. Kim ran well for like 2 years, and then I don't know what happened, but then he went by the wayside. Andy Fife, he fought injuries also, but then he and I were teammates on our national teams and state teams my junior and senior year because he also missed some years of eligibility due to injuries.
And how much did having competitive teammates benefit you?
Oh, if you have quality kids to run with, it pushes you in practice, and having a good team was always nice in cross country because it motivated you to do well.
And what was the feedback cycle that you would get in college compared to the feedback that, say, you'd get when you were working with your dad as your coach?
It was a different level. It was a bigger scope of things at the college level, but you still were at one level of competition with your peers and those in your same age group. So Indiana competed at the NCAA Division II level. There were individuals who could compete at the Division I level, which included myself and several people on the team. But the majority of athletes were not the superstars in the sport. So you had a good level of competition from all types of runners in high school and in college. That was a hard one to answer.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, let's talk about the big competition across colleges. Teams like Edinburgh had big success with their teams in the 70s. Who were the college competitors and rivals of your period?
Well, Edinburgh had many kids that were national caliber, All-Americans. They had one that ran there before I went to school, who was a national champion,
Who was that?
Dave Antagnoli.
Mhm.
I mean, they just had numerous top quality kids competing when we were at Indiana. So Edinburgh was our primary rival, plus they were also in Western Pennsylvania. So from a recruiting standpoint, their coaches were recruiting and trying to get the kids from the same database as Indiana. Then we also had good competition from the eastern half of the state with schools like Millersville, East Stroudsburg, and Bloomsburg.
Well, let's talk about the nature of college athlete support. As a big sports, of course, today, football, basketball for the NCAA, especially Division I, generate huge amounts of money. They're changing the nature of athlete compensation. What was available to you there in the early 70s?
Most everybody at our level, at the Division II level, was non-scholarship. Your stipends included meal money, getting to do some travel with not having to pay expenses. We ran in California, Missouri, Wisconsin, different parts of the country. So I got to go travel some places and have some good experiences that way. We weren't on scholarship. You just got enough money to make ends meet, to have fun and go race and compete well and represent your school.
Yeah, one thing I remember is the other non-monetary benefit was getting to register for classes early. Was that something that was part of your experience? So you could make sure you booked all your classes so you could make practice.
Oh, absolutely. That was a nice thing with going to school early, was being able to pick your classes so that you could do practice. Yeah, that was one positive benefit about being on the team. I
Let's
forgot
talk
about
about,
that.
yeah, it's just something that makes a big difference, especially your freshman year when everybody's fighting for all the same courses. Let's talk about your success in university and your failures or disappointments. But what was your best successes at the university career?
Well, my best success was my senior year, making NCAA Division II cross country All-American, being the first one for IUP. And then our team finished third at the NCAA championships. So again, that was also a first. Getting national recognition individually and as a team was probably the highlight. My junior year, our team finished fourth at the NAIA national championships. Edinburgh won that, but again, we were fourth and we got recognized as an All-American team. And to date, those two teams in 1976 and 1977 are the only men's teams that garnered All-American status in IUP's history.
Cool. Well, let's go back to that race. What do you remember about that? Let's talk about the first one, the individual All-American race. What do you remember about that race?
Not a whole lot, other than at the 2 mile point, Coach Fry, who was our assistant coach, he was afraid I was going to take the lead. And he told me that because I was with the leaders at that point, and I knew I shouldn't do that. So I didn't take the lead. I stayed where I was content with being at the front of the race and letting things unfold from there. Otherwise, it was a cold, windy day in Chicago. Got individual pictures afterwards. But as far as the race itself, I was in a groove and I don't really remember much of the race.
It was obviously a big moment for you personally and for the team. How long did the high last?
I still have it. But the next week we ran the NAI Nationals up in Wisconsin. We stayed out there and went to that and drove up there. And I finished 26th there, missing All-American by 1 place and 8 seconds. So I might have had a little bit of a letdown. I would say the high was still there. And then when I got back to Indiana, I don't recall it, but I'm sure I got a lot of congratulations and pats on the back and recognition that way.
So that's a good way to end your career. Apart from getting injured and missing some opportunities, some races, parts of seasons, do you remember any formative races, whether you won or lost, which stay with you apart from that achievement race?
Probably my sophomore year, placing 12th at the Pennsylvania Conference meet and then 36th at Nationals showed me that I can compete with the best.
So that exceeded your expectations of the results?
No, I wouldn't say that. It just showed that if I work hard, I can have success.
Just quickly visit the academic part. running and schoolwork, were they always manageable, both for you?
Yes. And I felt that running helps you with your schoolwork because if you want to run well, you've got to be dedicated, you got to be disciplined, you have to be focused, you got to manage your time, get your sleep. All of that helps with, doing well in the classroom.
Well, let's do some name dropping now for other athletes of the area in the States, possibly best in Pennsylvania. Who were your key competitors or people that you made relationships with, admired, other runners from that time frame?
Well, one that's still a good friend of mine is Jeff Bradley, who ran for Millersville. He was an All-American also at the NCAA Division II level, and I've known him since high school because he went to a local high school near me. He was 2 years ahead of me. Other runners, Paul Martin was on my team my junior year, and he and I are still best friends. There's just numerous other runners that I maintain contact with over the years.
I'm looking for names. Who are some of the stars of the Pennsylvania Conference from other schools of that area who just pop into your head?
When I was there, you've got Pete Heason from East Stroudsburg, Steve Eachus from Bloomsburg, Kevin Foley from Edinburgh, Henry Winger and Jeff Foster from Edinburgh, but they only went there for 2 years, and then they transferred either out of school or went elsewhere. John Daub from Shippensburg. There were other kids, obviously, for the different schools later on, but those were individuals who ran well in the conference and at the same time when I was there.
Okay, you left school right after your final cross-country season? Did you finish then?
Yes, and I regret doing that. I wish I would have come back for my one more track season.
And what was the decision there? Would it have been possible even if you had graduated?
Yeah, I would have come back and taken business courses to get a second degree in business. In retrospect, I wish I would have done it. Yes, I graduated on a high note, but I never got a chance to see what my PRs could have been on the track come that spring. I wish I would have hopped on the track after my cross-country nationals and done a mile or done a 2 mile on the track while I was in excellent shape to see what I could have done for those shorter distances.
Right. Okay. So then we face another fall off the cliff thing. This one probably bigger because of the competition opportunities. What was your running activity then when you got out of college?
Well, I continued running with off and on injuries. Then I got into triathlons and duathlons, which were run, bike, run. And then I also got into amateur bicycle racing with the United States Cycling Federation.
And what level did you pursue each of those?
I was borderline professional as a duathlete with the run, bike, run on the Cycling Federation, and I was a Category 3 cyclist, but my best performances there were 6 or 7 Mid-Atlantic region championships, either in road racing or time trials. And then when I was 40 years old, I finished second at Masters Nationals in the 40 to 44 age group in the 40-kilometer time trial. So I was second at Nationals and got a silver medal in my age group based on countrywide performers.
That's age 40. Did you take a break for competing when you left university in your early 20s?
No, I had some injuries which set me aside for a little bit. And that's why I got into triathlons and the duathlons, because I had one foot injury which would not let me run the way I used to. And then after that foot injury, I was able to run, but I was only able to run 30 to 40 miles a week. So I supplemented that with the biking, and I actually got good at biking. So I became a duathlete. In Delaware, where I live, I'm known for my biking and duathlon accomplishments. And then Pennsylvania, I'm known for my running accomplishments.
Did you encounter any of the people that you met earlier, high school or college, in these competitions? Anybody else make those same transitions as you?
Numerous kids. I kept running into periodically people at bike races and duathlons who were previous runners. And in fact, Frank Shorter, who won the Olympic marathon in 1970, was it 72 or 76? I beat him in a duathlon up in Boston. Now, he was older than me, but he was trying duathlons. Mark Muggleton, who ran for Edinburgh, I ran into him at the duathlon national championships out in Colorado or New Mexico, somewhere out that way.
Now we're moving later into the 70s and then on into the next decade. And again, sponsorship, funding, all this is increasing. Did you have any sponsorship or funding for any of this, or were you self-supporting?
Mostly self-supported, but I competed for a cycling team here in Delaware where we got good discounts on bikes and equipment and stuff like that. And briefly, I was sponsored by Saucony when I was running after college. They sent us down to run the AAU Nationals in North Carolina, and I got to run Peachtree, where Saucony picked up the bill. When I was doing the duathlons, I had some little sponsorships on product, energy bars, and things like that for when I was doing the duathlons.
Now let's take a step back and talk about how this has been part of your life for so long. It may be difficult to describe it separately or how it integrates, but how did being a competitive runner and having a great deal of success, how do you think that affected you in the other parts of your life?
It taught me discipline. It kept me focused on objectives and things like that. My career was as a health and safety consultant, and I found my knowledge of ergonomics, anatomy, and things like that translated over into the sports world, where I could help fellow competitors with their posture and their position on the bike, their running postures and things like that to help them avoid neck injuries, hand discomfort, wrist discomfort, and things like that. My career with travel allowed me to travel to some places for work and competitions, but then also gave me the latitude to train because I was still doing double workouts, running in the morning, riding bike at night.
Obviously, this kind of level of sustained activity and discipline means sacrifice. We'll get back to more celebration talk, but do you ever look at or reflect or feel that there are things that you had to sacrifice that were part of this, that it's important to people to understand the things you knowingly gave up or the regrets, or what's the darker side of this thing that we can experience when we strive for excellence and drive ourselves to injury, to sacrifice and everything else? What are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't use the word darker, but if you're out there running and riding bike, you're obviously doing that with a goal in mind, and you're doing it with either like-minded folk or you're doing it by yourself. So if you're trying to establish a relationship with somebody else, it can affect that because instead of spending time with that person, you're out running, you're out riding, you're traveling off to races. They may go with you, they may not. They may do the same sports, they may not. You're not with potentially other people. You're sacrificing some social things to achieve the goals that you want to do. Because in the duathlons, the triathlons, cycling, running, you've got to put in the time and the effort and the hours if you want to do well. That's all time that you can't direct elsewhere.
Apart from a list of achievements on a resume that you've accomplished that you're proud of and are recorded, what would you like? What would you say would be the ideal of how people remembered you as a runner and a competitor? What they thought of when they said, who was Dick Wolf as a competitor and as a runner?
That I was obviously good at it, but also dedicated and humble maybe would be also good. Fair competitor. Because there's some athletes that are nasty competitors out there, and they'll win at whatever cost. I wasn't that way. If I didn't win, okay, I would be disappointed, but it wasn't the end of the world.
Did you ever see any instances of cheating or questionable behavior through your competing career from other competitors?
Well, I've seen fights after a
Wow.
bike race and stuff like that. Harsh words exchanged at times if somebody cut somebody off and things like that. You're competitors. It happens. The fight was two guys that didn't like the wheel they were following in the bike race and exchanged words and then had a confrontation afterwards. It happens in sports.
Well, let's go to the end of the cycle now, or the cycling back of it, where you get into mentoring and coaching. What's been your experience with that?
I've learned a lot over the years. I'm coaching high school track and field at this point. I try to give back as much as I can that way. Again, I do have a wealth of knowledge. I have a good athletic resume. I feel it's quite varied. It's not top heavy, but I've had good results at all different levels in several disciplines over the years. I just feel I have a lot to offer and a lot to share with people. And I try to do my best to share that and help others do well in the sport.
It's pretty much impossible to be very successful and achieve the things you have without being competitive and willing to work hard and driving. How does that affect you as a coach where you're not in control of the athletes that show up? How is that competitive drive either amplified or you need to suppress as a coach?
Matthew, the main thing there is I worked hard in high school, and I try to tell my kids if they want to do well. Some of them have these high aspirations, and I said, well, to achieve those aspirations, to win the county meet or be a state champ, you've got to work. The work ethic that I see these days, for the most part, is not there. Kids don't want to work. There are exceptions, as there is with anything, but trying to get the kids that I'm dealing with to work, it's hard.
Well, we're now 5 decades later. Your careers as an individual competitor, you've hung up your spikes and hung up your cleats. Is that right?
Yep, and the bikes are hanging on hooks in the garage. Yep.
Yeah. So what does that do to your identity? What is it like to say, I'm done as a racer?
It doesn't change me. It doesn't hurt. I mean, I've freely admitted that. My last race was a 100-mile bike race up at upstate New York in the hills. They were giving medals or awards in the top 3 in every 5-year age group. So my goal in that race was to finish in the top 3 in the 55 to 59 age group. And when it was all said and done, I got 3rd out of 22 guys in my age group. Got on the podium. I'm comfortable. I'm cool with where I'm at. I'm 68. I'm not going to set any more PRs. I can't lift what I used to. I don't even try to run because the body will tell me, nah, don't do that. I ride bike every day for an hour in the basement or at the gym. I'm making do.
So let's just write the headline. You can pick any time of your career. We're going to just write a newspaper headline. What is it? Dick Wolf, :
endurance athlete, runner, cyclist, and health and safety consultant.
All right, it's your CV.
After college, I wish I would not have had the injury to my foot, which I didn't hurt running. I hurt it playing a game, but I wish I would not have had that injury so that I could have trained and run the way I would have unhindered to then see what could I have actually done in the duathlons. Because in the United States, I could bike with all but 4 or 5 of the top pros, but I couldn't run with them. They would beat me by 2 minutes on a 5K. And then there's 2 5Ks. So I'm 4 minutes behind after 2 5Ks. And I wish I could have trained the way that and run the way I would have prior to the injury. But it was all sorts of, would have, should have, could have.
Let's talk about the experience of the races. The fact is we have memories, we have mementos, we have photographs that review the career and the accomplishments. But how much of races, accomplishments, moments do you recall from 5 decades ago, running in the 70s? Are there memories or memories of the stories you've told?
It's not that my memory has faded, because I didn't remember them 30, 40 years ago. I remember how some races unfolded. Some of my running races, when did I take the lead? My nationals in college, I was in a zone. I was following runners, and I would want to ask Sutton, was I ever higher than 11th, other than at the beginning, at the 2-mile mark? Did I fade back to 11th, or did I move up at the end to 11th? I don't know. Or was I in 11th all the time and just held my spot, which is what I think I did, because I was happy to be in there in the All-American position. I was just content being there. Could I have done better? Maybe, but I was content just to be where I was.
You don't recall anybody passing you and saying, uh-oh.
No, because I wouldn't let that happen. I usually had a good kick because I was always working on that in my training. That's what my dad inspired. And that's what I have my kids doing, 50-yard sprints at the end of the workouts as best as they can, because I want them to be able to kick at the end. Remember the UPJ race, my senior year?
Yeah.
When we all went the wrong direction?
Yeah.
And all the F-bombs and all the foul language that we all unloaded on the people that directed us the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I still ran mid 25s on that course. I don't know how far we went out of the way, and we still swept them.
It wasn't that far, but I do remember it wasn't a very competitive race, except among our own team.
Right.
We did take the first 7 or 8 places.
Yeah, because we were establishing the varsity at that point.
Yeah.
Who was going to be traveling where.
Do you remember the moment, say, I did it, but race memories? That's something that goes.
There's other ones that I remember vividly when I was on my game in some bike races and some duathlons and stuff like that.
Couple decades later, too.
Oh, I still remember.
That's coming forward a couple decades.
Right, but I've got one bike race down in Maryland. It was when I was a Cat 4. It was 50 miles and it was 5 loops. So you had to do the same hills 5 and the same course 5 times. On the 3rd lap, I attacked on this one little hill and nobody went with me. I eased back because I didn't want to go with 20 miles to go. So I dropped back and I had one teammate. He had similar skills. He was a good climber, but he was also a good time trialist. The next lap around, when we got to this hill, I told him, I said, be on my wheel. Because when we hit this hill on the 4th lap, which was before the end of the 4th lap, I said, I'm going. So I took off on this hill, crested the top. It was just him and I. So we put it in time trial mode and we alternated and took off the rest of the way on the last 10 miles. When it came down to these hills at the end, I said, I'm toast. It was for a district championship. And he goes, hey, you instigated it. You orchestrated it. You take the win. Because I said I was fried. So he let me have the win. So I won the gold medal and he got second. So we went 1-2 as a team. And then after the race, there was one guy back in the pack who was listening to chatter from other folks. These other guys were saying, well, we got to work together and go catch them. This guy, Mark, that I knew, he goes, you're not going to catch them. They're gone. He knew our capabilities. That one I remember vividly. And John, the guy that went with me, that's still a race that he recalls vividly because the plan worked to a T. And we took 1-2. So I have a couple races like that. And I have one where I lost because I lost to a better guy, and my tactics were fine. It's just he outsprinted me on a long road race. There's some I remember the full detail, and then there's others I can't recall shit.
Running in the 70s and that era was just a great time to be a runner and a great time to be, I think, in America and a great time to be in your 20s or whatever. And we just lost a runner. Don Friedline, a well-known marathoner, 4x400 All-American at IUP, just died. What are your memories of Don Bushy Friedline?
Well, I lived with Don for the cross-country house for 2 years. And again, a good guy, a fun guy. He had the full range of athletic talent, but I didn't keep in touch with him much after college, because he was in Western Pennsylvania. So we kind of went our own separate ways. Nice guy. Again, fun. He was very smart and he was a good athlete. And he also did well in triathlons and some of that stuff too, which he dabbled into.
Yeah, it's a big loss to the running community and to the IUP alumni group. Yeah. So it was great. Thank you very much, Dick, for reviewing your life. I hope it was mostly pleasurable for you to talk about and reflect on. We'll be talking to other people. Some of the people you mentioned, some people that didn't, some people who know you, and hopefully we'll have a collection of insights of that whole generation of runners who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.